Hi everyone, welcome to your daily roundup of AI news. Lots of things to discuss today, but we have to start with the biggest news item, which is the launch of GPT 5.2 by OpenAI. Now, we've been waiting for this release since the launch of Gemini 3 Pro, which has been a huge success. It actually caused OpenAI to declare code red, and they put all their resources on making GPT 5.2 better, and now it's here. So OpenAI is basically framing GPT 5.2 as their most advanced model for real-world professional work. It's better at creating spreadsheets, building presentations, writing code, receiving images, and handling complex multi-step projects. Now, they're claiming that this model outperforms industry professionals in 71% of evaluated tasks, and it does this 11 times faster and at less than 1% of the cost of a human expert. Now, every release of every model so far has kind of made such statements, but what I personally care about is how does it compete with the other leading models such as Gemini and Claude. So on benchmarks, OpenAI is claiming new top scores across the board, but to make a fair comparison, we have to look at more in depth. So basically, we have to compare apples to apples. Right now, GPT 5.2 comes in three versions: Instant, Thinking, and Pro. Now, Instant and Thinking are available in their Plus subscription. That's the subscription that you pay $20 a month for. And Pro is actually only available in their Pro plan, which costs around $200 a month, right? So I'll be comparing GPT 5.2 Thinking with Gemini 3 Pro and Claude Opus 4.5. GPT 5.2 Pro has better benchmark scores, but it also costs 12 times more than GPT 5.2 Thinking. The closest competitor to Pro will be the Gemini 3 Pro Deep Think, which is technically not a model, but more of a feature on top of Gemini 3 Pro, where they just give it more compute and perform parallel reasoning to get better reasoning scores. And I will not be comparing those two in this video. All right, let's get into it. Okay, over here I have a comparison between Claude Opus 4.5, Gemini 3 Pro, and GPT 5.2. These are the latest models from all these respective companies. So this will give you a very good comparison between these leading models, right? So if you start with context window, we can see that nothing's pretty much changed. Gemini 3 Pro still has the largest context window with around 1 million tokens, and then that follows up with GPT 5.2 having 400,000. Now, OpenAI is claiming that GPT 5.2 is better at long context reasoning than before, but still, Gemini does have the largest context window. Now, all three of them have multimodal support, but I would pretty much say that Gemini 3 and GPT have been kind of competing in the multimodal race, and Claude hasn't really been focusing on that as much. Now, if you look at the knowledge cutoff, obviously GPT has a more recent cutoff, but I guess that's not as relevant as it used to be, considering all of them have the ability to do a web search and get you the required information from the internet. Now, I will be talking about pricing in detail, but we'll come back to it after we've gone through everything else. Right. So latency is a good metric that kind of shows how long the model takes to kind of respond to you. Now, you can see that GPT 5.2 is around 4 times slower than both Opus 4.5 and Gemini. But this has actually been the case with previous GPT models as well. ChatGPT claims that it is it's a reasoning model, so it's okay that it takes longer as long as you do get better quality output. Now, when you look at throughput is basically when once it kind of figures out what it needs to respond to you with, then at what kind of rate does it respond to you, right? Like how fast do you see the text on your screen? And in that, GPT it does seem to be, GPT 5.2 does seem to be leading. All right, now let's go into the benchmarks. All right, let's start with the one where I would say GPT 5.2 has made the largest advancement, and that is ARC AGI v2. Now, this is a benchmark for visual reasoning, like questions like, or tasks like count yellow blocks on the screen, then draw that many purple dots in the top row, things like that, right? Basically, this means that GPT 5.2 is great at figuring out how you want something to be done quickly without actually having to give it a very long prompt, and it's clearly scored way above the other two in this category, right? All right, so if you look at the next one, GPT seems to be leading in GPQA, which is a scientific Q&A benchmark that requires a lot of reasoning. Then we have Gemini, which is leading in MMLU, which requires multilingual knowledge and reasoning. And we have known that Gemini has been great at that. All right, then kind of we go into coding, and Sweetbench Verified is the main coding benchmark that has been used recently. And GPT did beat Gemini 3 Pro, but Opus 4.5 is still in the lead slightly with 0.9%, right? All right, if you look at AIM 2025, ChatGPT, it did get a 100% score on this. Basically, this is an American math contest benchmark. So basically, you have a lot of math reasoning that goes on in this. Now, it does say that Gemini did get 100%, but that's not technically accurate because Gemini did have access to external tools like a calculator, other things, whereas GPT 5.2 has gotten the 100% score without any external tools being available to it. All right, moving on. GPT is leading in the Charive-R benchmark, which demonstrates the ability to review research papers and reason over the content from arXiv, which is a research paper repository or research article repository. Now, moving on, Claude is better at MCP Atlas, which shows the kind of the ability of a model to use tools in the model context protocol framework, which is not surprising because Anthropic did come up with that protocol, right? All right, moving on, Gemini is better at MMMU Pro, which shows advanced multimodal understanding. So being able to understand images, charts, diagrams. So we've known for a while that Gemini is actually pretty good at multimodal support. So this was not a surprising one. All right. Then moving on to this one, and GPT actually has improved significantly in the Screen Spot Pro benchmark, which basically shows the model's ability to perform actions on a computer screen. And then we have the Tau 2 benchmarks. Basically, Tau 2 retail, what it shows is a model's ability to handle retail custom support, and I believe Claude is leading in this. And then we have Tau 2 telecom, in which GPT 5.2 is leading, and this is basically where a model has to perform like telecom customer support, right? And then we have Terminal Bench 2.0, which is a command line coding benchmark. So basically, which model is the best at coding when you're doing it through terminal. Now, OpenAI hasn't really given their official scores, but Vals.ai is an independent model evaluation company, and they've put actually GPT above Opus 4.5 in Terminal Bench. So basically means that if you're going to be trying terminal-based clients for models, GPT 5.2 will be better than Opus 4.5. All right, finally, the last one that I'll kind of go through. Gemini is obviously better at video MMU, which shows video-based multimodal understanding and reasoning. We've known again for a while that Gemini is better at multimodal, so this still stands. So if I summarize the benchmark results, GPT 5.2 is kind of pulling ahead in like the big reasoning heavy categories, but it's still a step behind in a couple of places like pure multimodal reasoning, where Gemini is still the one to beat, and some coding scenarios where Claude is still going to be better, right? I don't think that we should just compare raw benchmark scores. We should also be looking at pricing for these models. So if you look at these numbers, right, it gives you the price for 1 million tokens, like input tokens, output tokens, right? So GPT 5.2 is the cheapest for input tokens, while Gemini 3 Pro is the cheapest for output tokens. And Claude is pretty much kind of like at least 2x more than both of them, both Gemini and GPT 5.2. Now, what does this exactly mean for the average user, right? So if your workload is input heavy, like you're doing RAG, you have big documents you are giving to the model, or you're giving it like transcripts, then GPT 5.2 will be better because it has the lowest input cost. Whereas if you have a workload which is like output heavy, so you're expecting like long summaries or reports, in that case, Gemini is going to be your most cost-effective option. Coding is slightly different because Claude is better. So if you want to use Claude, you're going to have to kind of pay premium for it as well. And that's why a lot of like engineers do complain that they run into limits with Claude, whereas they don't run into those limits with like ChatGPT or Gemini, right? Okay. All right. So you just sat through a lot of data about these models and about GPT 5.2, right? Now the real question is still, what does this release actually mean for OpenAI? Now, like, do we think that they have destroyed the competition? Absolutely not. But I do think that they have caught up in the areas that matter, and in some cases, it actually pulled ahead, like reasoning. From here, I don't think OpenAI needs to win every single benchmark. If they can pair this model with a smoother overall experience, at least compared to Gemini, I think a lot of users will stay. I think with Google, a lot of users have been having like user experience issues. Like, for example, it's hard to get API keys. They have a lot of products in the same space. Take Gemini itself, for example, right? Gemini is a model. Gemini is a chatbot. Gemini is a voice assistant on phones. It's also a CLI. So Google is creating quite a lot of confusion in this space. So my final thoughts are that GPT 5.2 is a solid strategic release that puts AI firmly back in the race. And I think now the real battle is more towards, it's not going to be towards into like who has the best model, but more on who can turn these models into the simplest, most reliable everyday tool. All right. So we went quite deep into GPT 5.2 today, but there's been a lot of other things have been happening. So let's quickly go through them as well. First up, Adobe is adding Photoshop, Express, and Acrobat directly into ChatGPT, which basically will turn ChatGPT into like the best tool for creative work and like using PDFs. I think this is an excellent move by Adobe. because a lot of creative professionals were slowly kind of moving towards AI platforms, and this allows Adobe, probably the best distribution platform they could have in this kind of AI time. OpenAI will obviously benefit because it will get all the creative professionals to use ChatGPT because they've been using Adobe tools before. So it's a big win-win for them, for both, and I think it's pretty great, right? All right, so next, Google DeepMind is building a robotics lab, which is going to be powered by Gemini, of course, and is going to be used to discover new materials for chips, solar, and medical imaging. Basically, they want to apply their latest model to actual scientific advancements, and this is a lab that will do it for them. All right, staying on Google for one more, Google Cloud. Google actually now supports MCP, Model Context Protocol. This means that AI agents can talk to like Google Maps, Google Drive, and other Google services through a standard layer instead of like having to create like custom integrations. I'm very happy because I think MCP does standardize a lot of things, and it's going to be much easier and simpler to build AI agents now. All right. Starcloud, which is backed by NVIDIA, has been able to train an AI model in space. Obviously, we're facing a lot of limitations here on Earth with power generation and cooling. So this kind of proves that it can also be done in space, but still there are a lot of questions that haven't been answered, like can we do this at scale? And yeah. So, all right, finally, the last one. In the US, the president has signed an executive order aimed at blocking and punishing state-level AI regulations. The idea is pretty simple. One national standard that can allow US to basically win this AI race, right? It's obviously going to be a big win for AI companies, but I do think this is going to cause a lot of unrest going into next year when we have midterm elections and a lot of people in the US are actually calling for AI regulations. Okay. All right. That's the rest of the AI fire hose for today. That's it for this episode. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.